Hi, guys. Cecile Edwards here of the Mommy Matters podcast. I have to tell you, if you have not heard about Anchor, it is the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. And Anchor will distribute your podcast for you, so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. Did I tell you that you can also make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership? It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. So download your Anchor app or go to Anchor FM, anchor.fm to get started. You will not be dissatisfied. Welcome to the Mommy Matters podcast, where Mommy Matters is a double entendre that states and declares that mommies matter, where we have conversations surrounding mommy matters, from conception to pregnancy to postpartum, mother and father wounds, dating, mindfulness and self-care, spirituality, parenting, discipline, legislation, money, and so much more. It is my hope and my prayer that the information that you gather here serves as a blueprint for generational and individual ascension. Enjoy. All right. Welcome. Thank you for listening to the Mommy Matters podcast. And of course, I am your host, Cecile Edwards, the creative director of Mommy Evolve. And today we have the topic of from surviving to thriving, proactive self-care to avoid tantrums. And this has a little bit of a double meaning, but we'll get into that shortly. And as I said before, welcome to the Mommy Matters podcast, where we discuss all things mommy, parenting, self-care, intergenerational conversations. Nothing is too big or too small for us to have a conversation about, because there's many areas of parenting and mothering that need some illumination, and that is what we are here for. And today I am so excited because I have a guest, Nikki Morro, of To the Moon Parenting Coaching. You can find her under that name on Instagram. The name of her business, however, is To the Moon and Back Behavioral Consulting. And I look forward to having this conversation because I think it's always a great conversation to have around assisting parents in learning how to relate better to their children. And oftentimes, through learning how to relate better to our children, we learn how to relate better to ourselves, to our spouse, to family, other relationships. It's a very illuminating process, I must say. Anyway, without further ado, before I start jumping into some nuances here, I would like to have Nikki introduce herself and tell us a little bit about her business and who she is, and etc. Hi, Nikki.
Hi, thank you for having me. So I am a parent coach, and I know that most people are not really familiar with what that is, but basically what it is I'm a parent educator. I'm somebody that goes and meets with parents on a one-on-one basis to really give them that support that they need to make those positive changes in their parenting and in the relationship with their children. And a lot of times we've taken parenting classes, we've researched on the internet, we've read books, and we still kind of fall flat as far as actually making some impactful changes in our lives. And so that's where the power of coaching comes in. It really is having a professional eye that's there in your corner to keep you motivated, to keep you accountable, because anytime we're dealing with behaviors, we're dealing with habits. And habits are just so hard to break for ourselves and for our children. So a lot of times we'll make some progress, but then we'll take 10 steps back, and then we'll feel deflated and we'll lose our momentum. And then we fall back into these old patterns and these old habits. And if you have somebody that's there to support you, to brainstorm with you when these inevitable situations come up that you just don't know what to do and you're not seeing the results, that's where, the coaching comes in. And that's where you would have somebody like me in your corner to really support you and brainstorm with you so that you ultimately feel that success and you get those changes in your life that make your day-to-day just so much easier and flowing so much freer. And really setting the foundation proactively with your children and your parent-child bond to be able to have that respectful, loving, compassionate relationship with your children that will make them want to stay around, that will make them want to be with you throughout their life, rather than, those situations where they grow up and then they just want to be away from you because, they feel controlled or they feel like they're not respected, like they're not valued. And that's the last thing I think that we want to feel as parents when our children, get older. We want to make sure that we have that bond with them. So that is what I'm passionate about. I've had over 9 years of experience working with parents and children. My background is in behavior therapy. So I've worked with a lot of children with special needs, early intervention programs and such. So I have a very general experience with children and different strategies. And I also continue to do research as far as the different philosophies out there, such as respectful parenting, conscious parenting. But I do tie it in. I feel like as parents, it's our responsibility not to just buy in hook, line, and sinker to any philosophy out there, but to educate ourselves and continue educating ourselves so that we can find what works for us and what speaks to our souls and what speaks to our families. And then just go from there. It's not a matter of one size fits all. It's a matter of really finding what feels good in your gut and going with it. So that's what I've done as a parent, and that's what I coach parents on. And so that's why my motto is no judgment, just help.
Mm-hmm. I love that. You said a lot in there about, parents finding ways to, and I think that that's the critical piece right there,
Mm-hmm.
to not give up, but to find ways and to know that there are so many different ways that you can parent, that you can find something that works for you and be okay with that, because there is so much information. We go online and Google this and that and come back with these statistics that is almost always very dire. Right.
Yeah.
It's like you Google that I got a cut on my finger and they're like, you're gonna die or something like that. And
Yeah.
that's not the case, right? So there's always a strategy, there's always a tool. And yes, it takes time. And yes, it takes, a lot of patience. But this is where someone like Nikki comes in and is able to assist. So Nikki, I want you to talk about what is one of the most prevalent. I know these days, as an educator, I come from different angles. As an educator, I know one of the things that we discuss in schools, for example, is emotional intelligence as something that we want to build in children, how they're going to be able to identify their feelings and how they're going to learn how to process them, et cetera, et cetera. As a parent coach, what are some of the most prevalent things that you have seen that parents struggle with?
I always start my coaching philosophy on looking back at how we were parented,
Mm-hmm.
because that is pretty much the only education that most of us have had as far as how to be a parent, right?
Yep.
So what I found is that when you take time to reflect back on your childhood, to kind of look at those things that have been indoctrinated into you, right? For better or for worse. And I tell parents, these things that we are sticking and holding so fast to because they've been taught to us, they've been ingrained in us. It's a matter of really looking at those beliefs and those belief patterns and seeing are these things that I want to continue carrying on and perpetuating for generations? Or is this something that, you know what, I really don't buy into anymore? This doesn't feel right to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to now take action to change it for the future generations, right? So it has to do with emotional intelligence. It has to do with acknowledging our strengths and our weaknesses, our wounds, and healing those wounds so that we don't perpetuate them and kind of subconsciously push those onto our children.
Right.
And it's such a hard thing to do, to become aware of it in the first place.
Yeah.
But being able to notice, like, why are we getting triggered? A lot of times these things that trigger us in our kids are these festering wounds from our childhood, of something that happened to us or something somebody said to us ages ago.
Mm-hmm.
And now our children are, somehow triggering that because of something they say or something they do. And then we find ourselves just in the moment reacting how, our adults or our parents in the past reacted to us. Right? It's just a knee-jerk reaction. It's something that happens in these heightened states of stress. It's not a choice. It's not a conscious choice of how we want to react to the situation. And so just building that emotional intelligence, I always tell parents, be compassionate, not only for your children, but for yourself, because somewhere in each of us, there is that child still, right? There's that child that was yelled at or that was spanked, different things that happened in our childhood that isn't healed yet. And so we need to be able to have compassion for when we do fall into those bad habits of yelling or maybe spanking or any of those things that doesn't sit well with us now, right? And when you feel guilty, I always tell parents that's when you have the opportunity to come back and have that conversation with your child, have that repair, build that emotional intelligence, and let your child know, hey, mommy or daddy, we're human,
Mm-hmm.
I shouldn't have yelled. I shouldn't have spanked you. And I feel really horrible that happened.
Right.
And, I was spanked when I was little. And when I'm stressed, when I'm upset, that's what I go to. And it's not something that I should be doing. And it's something that I want to really try not to do. But, I'm human and sometimes this happens, but I'm telling you that I'm sorry now. And I really apologize for doing that. And I will try so much harder next time to not let that happen. Right. So teaching your kids that compassion, teaching your kids not only is mommy human, but you're human as well. And then also teaching them the skill of that repair when they do make a bad choice or they do something that may hurt or impact somebody else negatively.
Mm-hmm. I think that right there, that because oftentimes that space in between of you're trying to fix the problem, but you're also falling back into it is a very, it's an interesting space to navigate. And I think that having those conversations, that communication really helps to sort of break up that energy of, you yourself wrestling with it and creating a situation where it's like, okay, we're all in this together, right? We've been pulled together by the universe to be a family. What does that mean? That means that we're going to have to take some of our goodness and our not so goodness and our lessons and our past and et cetera, and try to bring that together in such a way. And as you're speaking, in such a way to heal things and bring things to a greater legacy for everyone. And so as you're speaking, the title of this podcast is From Surviving to Thriving, Proactive Self-Care to Avoid Traumas. So proactive self-care to avoid tantrums is, I was sort of speaking from the adult perspective when I considered this topic or this subject, this title, because we often don't think of adults as having tantrums, but we do. And our tantrums, I mean, when you define tantrum, Nikki, A tantrum is what is a tantrum? If you were to put it in a definition, because I want people to hear hear this very solidly, so that we can understand that yes, you as adult can have a tantrum, so that you can now look at the tantrum that your child may be having in a different light, right? So putting that name to those things in that
Yeah,
different.
so I mean, the way that I would define tantrums is any type of heightened emotion where we have kind of lost our senses. We've lost control. I feel like
Mhm.
it's really the base of it is this feeling of losing control over ourselves and our actions in that moment. Um, so yeah, it's very much running and geared off of that animalistic part of our brain, that fight or that flight. It's not reasonable. It's not in the moment. If somebody tries to call you on it, you'll probably escalate. It's not something where you can really be rational and talk to in that moment, because your emotions are just so heightened and so out of control. You've kind of gone over that cliff.
Right. And so, in saying that, we see that again, as Nikki was saying, that sometimes the parents can have those tantrums too, where you are relating something that happens right now, for perhaps, to the situation, something that happened in the past, and now you've just reacted from that past experience. And so you have to sort of bring yourself back into the space of what's happening right now, how you can bring the situation to a resolution, or not, maybe just walk away from it until you can calm yourself down. You have the ability to do that. So now, thinking from a parent's perspective, in your own child having a tantrum, this is what you're going to try to teach them to do, right? To practice more mindfulness and
Mhm.
self-awareness, so that they can properly navigate themselves and not do anything that's too over the too over the hill, in terms of their behavior, that it may be more difficult to pull themselves back from, right? And but even if they do, having self-compassion and self-love, so that they can pull, not feel guilty about it, not beat themselves up about it, etc. And so again, I wanted you, Nikki, to sort of give us some tips. I know that I asked you a question recently, because it was something that I had been dealing with a child that I was with. And he likes to go outside, but it was sort of like, if he went outside and acted up, they took going outside away from him. And that's something that parents typically do, right? If
Mhm.
the child can't properly maintain their behavior with something that they like, they'll take it away from them. But I wonder whether or not that's a strategy that always works well. Because if it's something that they like and kind of calms them and soothes them, what is a better way? Is there a better way to teach them how to relate with that thing in a way that's, healthy? So if they love the computer, I know technology is like the thing, right?
Mhm.
How could we teach them to find more balance, so that when they may have to put it down, they don't have a reaction that makes them feel like, that we're trying to snatch them from their joy, or something like that. Just like within our own selves. Like, I like to eat cake, but I know I can't eat cake all the time, right? So
Yeah.
I had to develop a strategy within myself to keep me from eating cake. So how do
Yes.
Mhm.
So, a big thing that I teach parents, and a lot of people's mouths just completely drop when they hear this, but it really puts a perspective on things, is that there's the prefrontal cortex is the part of our brain that is responsible for planning and rational thought and good reason and judgment, right?
Mhm.
And it is the part of the brain that a lot of times we think, um, as adults, we expect our children to be able to relate to this and understand this. But the fact is that that prefrontal cortex is not fully developed until the age of 25.
Mhm. Yep.
So it is physiologically impossible for a child to have that type of rational thought, to have that type of reason and planning and good judgment when it comes to those specific things. That's why it is so critical as our child's confident leader, right? Because that's our job and our roles in their life, is to be able to set those boundaries for them, because they are not capable of it. It's not a matter of us trying to take control over them and manipulate them. It's a matter of setting these boundaries in order to keep them safe and to keep them healthy. And like you said, to teach them and coach them, instill these positive life lessons into them. So, I mean, I see that, you know, sometimes parents, there is such a thing as a good and fair, effective consequence. You know, a lot of times I see parents just throwing out, you know, things that are unrelated, consequences that are unrelated to the offense, right? So if a child, you know, doesn't eat their dinner, then no TV, right? But yet, where's the relationship between not eating your dinner and TV? So a big thing that I coach parents on is making sure that the consequence that you create is as relatable as possible to whatever the offense was. Whatever your child did that was quote unquote wrong, or needs to be corrected, then you need to come up with a consequence that's fair, and not only duration and time, age appropriate, but also related to the offense.
Mm-hmm.
So then that is where the coaching comes in. It's not this arbitrary consequence that you're just pulling out from nowhere to punish your child. It's more of an education. And I do teach parents the big distinction of whether this is a privilege or this is a right, right? As a parent, it's important for us to teach our kids that distinction, because a lot of times, you know, we hear that children are getting more and more entitled nowadays. They just expect and want more and want more, and it's never enough. So if we're trying to set our child up for success out in the real world, then it's important that we do teach them, you know, certain things are privileges, certain things need to be earned. They're not just given to you, but certain things are your rights. You know, you have the right to have clean clothes and to have a roof over your head and to be taken care of and get your food and all those things. Those are rights. But as far as having your iPad for, you know, the second hour of the day or whatever, that is a privilege. You know, that is something that you need to earn through making good choices throughout the day. Otherwise, that is something that could be lost.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it's not, if you go about it that way, it's not a punitive consequence. It's not just to punish them. It's more to teach them that there are certain things that they need to earn by being a part of this family. It's not just given to them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. I think that that's an excellent point, especially about giving consequences that are similar to the infraction, so to speak. Right.
Yeah.
So um, because then now you're directly relating. So for example, in real life, you know, adults, we know that if we spend all our money, we won't have any money. Right.
Uh-huh.
And so, you know, if you don't eat what would be a good consequence, for example, for, you know, you don't eat all of your vegetables, for example. I don't know if that's is there a consequence? Do you give consequences for something like that? What are approved and unapproved behavioral um, issues that you would, because some people may make a big deal about things like, you know, not eating the vegetables, and some
Mm-hmm.
people may not. So how do you
Yeah, I mean, there, just like with parenting strategies, there's so many strategies now, or like philosophies now on um, forcing kids to eat certain things or expecting them to eat certain things. So then it causes, you know, a bad relationship with food and all this. So it kind of snowballs, but so do a lot of things, you know. But
Right.
the main thing, I think, the main goal as a parent is you want to make sure that your child is eating the stuff that they need to sustain their body and their physical and mental growth, correct?
Mm-hmm. Right.
So it's a matter of whatever you think is fair as a parent, right? So for instance, with my daughter, she's 4.5. I realize that her stomach is much smaller than me. I'm not going to force her to eat beyond her sense of fullness, right? But what I do is I do this trick called first then. So I tell her, first you need to eat, you know, the 3 bites of protein that I gave you on your plate, and you need to finish your vegetables. So something that's reasonable, something that I feel good as a parent that she's gotten the sustenance that she needs from that meal before, first then. So first you need to eat those healthy things, then you can have your dessert, right?
Mm-hmm.
So first then. And if for some reason she's like, nope, I'm full, I don't want to eat that, then I'm like, okay, I guess then you're telling me that you're too full to have dessert as well, right? So that's kind of the reaction that I take, is that, if you're telling me that you don't want to eat that, that's fine. I'm not going to force you to eat it, but you don't get this thing that you did want, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
for some parents, they may say, well, my kid doesn't like dessert. Okay, well, do they like watching a show or an episode on TV after dinner? Okay, then maybe that's what they don't earn. They don't get that privilege unless they've eaten that, that healthy food that they're supposed to
Mm-hmm.
eat.
Mm-hmm. I remember growing up, we would just have to sit there until we ate it.
Yeah.
And oftentimes we'd be sitting there forever. I will never forget that I sat at the dinner table for hours because I refused to eat the okra. And guess what vegetables Cecile won't eat?
Oh
To
God.
this day, I refuse to eat okra, and people consistently try to tell me because it's so good for you,
Yeah.
um, especially in pregnancy. It was made for me a lot, and I just could not consume it. And so,
Mhm.
and so that's something to consider, in terms of forcing, just defaulting to forcing the child as opposed to finding ways that you could create an environment where they just kind of, I don't want to say naturally, but kind of just want to consume it, or you're giving them the reasons or ability to consume it without there being this force and creating this blockage in their mind behind this thing, right? So that's
Yeah.
very critical.
Yeah, and kids love choices. So, if you know that your kid hates Brussels sprouts, like hates Brussels sprouts, why would you put it on the plate and expect them to eat it? You
Right.
know, come up with another solution. Maybe it's carrots. Give them a choice. Okay, you need to eat some veggies tonight. Do you want carrots or corn? You
Mhm.
know, do you want tomatoes or cucumbers? Something that that they're not so completely adverse to.
Mhm.
Broccoli maybe may not be their thing. So it's a matter of, what I always tell my daughter is like, okay, a lot of times she's resistant to even tasting something in the first place. And I tell her, Jocelyn, like, let's at least taste. You can't just say you don't like it because you've never tried it. So at least take a taste. If you don't like it, I'm not going to make you eat it.
Right.
So it kind of removes that power struggle. It removes that, I'm the parent, I know what's best for you and you need to eat this. It's a matter of, it kind of puts more of the control in their situation. And eating is something that is so personal. It's something, sustaining your body is a very personal thing.
Right.
So to necessarily force a child to eat one thing or another, I feel like can really backfire on us, like it did in your case, right?
Me and the okra.
Yeah.
Yes, it certainly could do that, but as you said, giving them the choice gives them the opportunity to do what children do, explore,
Mhm.
right? So you're exploring what it is. What I will do is I'll put just a little bit on the plate and say, like what you said earlier, if you want the dessert, just take that and eat that and see, and usually that leads them to just having that incorporated in their diet, or mixing things. There may be some vitamins or something that they need to take, mix it in
Yeah.
it with something that they like some juice, some, natural juice or something like that, so that they're getting it, and you don't have to struggle with them, because that's the other part of this. the self-care part for parents, because
Mhm.
it's, some parents are highly stressed over the even thought of having to negotiate these things with their children. And this is
Yes.
where a lot of the issue comes in, because we just think that, this is what you must do because I'm telling you. And let's give some context to this, right? Because I know what it's like to be a single parent. I know what it's like to be a parent that works a lot, works outside of the home. It's
Mhm.
sort of like you just want things to flow. So when you come home, you don't want to have to negotiate with someone, which with the little person living in your house,
Mhm.
right? You kind of just want it to flow. And so it's really a mindset of understanding certain things when you are dealing with your child as well. So I just wanted you to talk a little bit about that process as well, and how we as parents can take better care of ourselves so that we can meet the challenges of, being able to nurture our children um, well.
Yeah. So, um, uh, like I've said with the about the prefrontal cortex, so that's something that we have fully developed, right? If you're over the age of 25, it's fully developed. So we have that capacity to plan ahead of time. We have that capacity to work with that rational part of our brain, right? So that's something that we can do again as our child's confident leader ahead of time. If we know that there are certain patterns that arise in our day-to-day lives, for instance with our children, right? For instance, every time at mealtime my child says, no, I'm not going to eat that, that's gross, which a lot of toddlers will do.
Mhm.
um, so if you know that there's a pattern, if there's a habit of behavior that's occurring, that's when you can, in those nighttime hours when your child's already put in bed, come up with, a plan. Okay, so this is something that's really been stressing me out. Every time I prepare, I go through the hassle of preparing a meal, and my child refuses to eat it. It's a
Mhm.
big pain point for a lot of moms,
Yes, it
a lot
is
of
a
parents.
trigger.
Yeah. And so it's a matter of noticing that trigger and then brainstorming with that prefrontal cortex, that planning part of your brain ahead of time. Okay, so if my child says this, what am I going to do? Am I going to give them a choice of two other options? Am I going to just say, okay, if you don't eat what's on your plate, you don't get dessert? Or am I going to make them sit there until they have eaten what's on their plate? What are you going to do? What feels good to you? How do you want to follow through? And just having that pre-work on your brain, that proactive work with yourself, really helps, so that in that moment when you're completely exhausted because it's the end of the day, you got home from a full day of work, you now had to prepare a meal, you serve the meal, and then all of a sudden your kid triggers you, right? Because they say, I'm not going to eat that. So if you already know what you're going to react, how you're going to react to that, it happens in a more formulated way. It happens in more of a rational way rather than a reactive way.
Mhm.
So that's the important thing. Anytime that you notice patterns in your child's behavior, in your behavior, to how you respond to their behavior, then you have the power to sit back and kind of address those things again proactively to find out how you're going to react to them. Make a plan. And if you have, a partner, significant other, you can sit down together and have that conversation of like every day in the morning it's a struggle to get out the door.
Mhm.
Okay, what are we going to do? What is our plan going forward so that we don't keep having to have this stressful morning every morning?
Mhm. Right. Very critical. Because if we just sort of kind of let it continue to happen, then we feel out of control, and we feel a certain sense of anxiety around the issue if we don't, get in front of it. And that anxiety can cause other issues, and
Yeah.
and so it's okay to sort of take your power back in these instances. And that's how you practice your self-care. You get in front of it when you see something, not necessarily trying to force a response from your child, but finding ways to co-create something that's going to be beneficial within the values of the family, and not stress you out. Okay.
Exactly.
And not stress you out. I think the critical thing to understand here is that you don't have to go through parenting consistently triggered, stressed out, and unclear on what to do with you, with
Yes.
whatever situation that it is. Okay. And so I love that strategy there. So, Nikki, are there any other tips, tools, considerations? What if you could say that there was one thing that you like, your biggest aha? What have you learned that you could say, in whether it's in your own parenting, whether it's through being a parenting coach, that you want to share with parents?
Well, for years I worked with parents and they told me, oh, but you're not a parent yet, so you don't understand. It's so much harder once you're a parent. And after having my daughter, I can say that they were very right on several things, because until you are a parent, you just don't know what you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
It's that complete, people can tell you all like till they're blue in the face, but until you live that experience, until you've had that confrontation, basically, I feel like having a child, especially that is so much like you for good and for bad, can be very confronting, right?
Yeah.
And all our issues, we don't realize how annoying some of our traits are until we see our child doing it, right? And so I feel like that was the biggest aha, was just that feeling of like, oh my gosh, like this is so much harder than I ever thought it would be. And it's this thing where, for better or worse, you're confronted with it constantly. Like you can't get away from it, right? So it's either learn the strategies and the skills to make life easier, or continue to perpetually struggle. And then ultimately, I feel like it's inevitable to burn out to some extent, right? So again, like that self-help and being able to notice and ask for help when you need to ask for help, and seek the skills and seek the information. And a lot of times we are so, there's a stigma as far as to asking for help, especially as a parent. A lot of us feel like if we're a good parent, we shouldn't need to ask for help. That's not something, and we compare ourselves to future generation or past generations and such, or people on Instagram or people on Facebook, they have it all together. Why don't I? And so it's a matter of just really realizing that everybody is struggling. Just some people are better at hiding it than others, and it's really having that compassion for ourselves as parents. And my biggest thing is I want to break that stigma. I want to break that stigma as far as asking for help, because parenting is the most important job that any of us will ever have. At least that's my opinion, my strong opinion. And so, none of us, including myself, know everything that there is to know about parenting. So that's why, you continue to educate yourself, you continue to ask questions, you continue to seek help. And a lot of times we try to fumble through it on our own, and we may make baby steps, but it's just like asking, you would go to a lawyer for any type of legal advice, right? You would go to a professional that has the education, that has a background to be able to help you with something that's important legally. So it's kind of the same thing, you know, with parenting. Like, why not go to a parent educator of some sort, you know, that has the training, that has the background to be able to help to coach you through those certain things. And that was the most humbling thing, is like, I have all these skills, I have all these strategies, and I am struggling. So how on earth are most mamas and papas out there doing it? I was just totally humbled by that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And that is why it's my mission and my passion to really go out there and spread this information so that, you know, we're not struggling as much as we are, because there's
Right.
so many expectations, especially on mamas, you know, to be working, to be bringing
Mm-hmm.
in money, to be handling the household,
Yeah.
and should be the primary caregiver, right? Because we're the nurturing ones, quote unquote. We're the
Right. Oh, we need to get into that. Okay. Because you just said a lot there.
yeah,
And the asking for help piece, mothers who, you know, whether you're a single parent, you're married, where the primary responsibility, or the perception is that the primary responsibility of rearing the children should be on the mom,
yeah,
um, is very interesting to me, because from my observations in families, not only is the dad critical, because there's something about children when they hear their father's voice,
mm-hmm.
they like shape up immediately.
Yeah.
And it's so hilarious to me. It's like the mom could be fussing and mussing all for hours, and the father can just come and say one thing or give a look. And that is so, I know that must be frustrating to many moms, but I think that that just points to one, letting go and allowing, you know, other people to, you know, discipline the children.
Mhm.
Understanding the community and how that works and how that functions, and getting people involved in the rearing and assisting the rearing of the children. I mean, yes, in a perfect world, we would just have, our families would be kumbaya and we would be able to do that. And that may not be what was handed to you, but I promise you that one of the number one things that you can do in alleviating some of your stresses, even if the person does not have children, because I have friends who don't have children and they still can give me light perspectives that I can bring to my interaction with my child. And so I think that, you know, we really have to free ourselves up from this thought that parenting has to be this heavy burden. Again, I'm going to keep on saying that because that's one of my mantras, is that you don't have to, parenting does not have to be troublesome. It does not have to be, you know. I know that's what's sold and that's what's told and that's what we perceive. However, I don't believe that that has to be the case personally.
Mhm.
So I want to talk a little bit about, before we get out of here, about the idea of building a community around yourself, because that's something that, like, how do you do that? What do you look for? What are some of the advantages of it? What are some of the drawbacks that you may have to consider while building that community, and what does that look like? And for me, I'm going to throw my first thing in there is, you know, you have to be a resource for others, first and foremost, right? So you know, be the friend that assists your friends that have children. You know, I know it's tempting to
Yeah.
just be able to buy them something, offer them, you know, an hour of taking care of their children so that they can go and breathe for a little bit. You know, offer them that kind of assistance. And, you know, someone just had a baby, you know, offer assistance of your time and energy. I promise you that is so much more valuable. But what are your thoughts on that?
As far as building a community, I feel like it's just, uh, I think first and foremost, we just need to be honest and open with what the heck is going on with us. I feel like we are, you know, in the United States, it's preached to us, and it's a form of pride to be so independent and so individualistic. And, you know, you go through most neighborhoods nowadays, at least, you know, the neighborhood I live in, you know, most of us don't really know or associate with our neighbors. And it's just kind of, it's slowly going the way of just being super isolated. And, you know, nowadays we don't even pick up the phone. We message, we text, we, you know, we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, and there's just this social disconnect. And when there's a social disconnect, there's isolation. When there's isolation, there's depression and anxiety. And I feel like that's just a matter of, you know, getting out there, meeting like-minded people, whether that's in a parent forum, you know, like whether that's taking a parenting class or going to some sort of mommy and me, or, you know, taking steps so that you get out there and you have those real conversations. You have, you know, it's not all sunshines and butterflies going on. And the connection comes from sharing those vulnerabilities. It's not, the connection doesn't come from this facade of everything's great and life is amazing and my kids are perfect and my husband's perfect. It comes from being open and vulnerable, you know, with people around us. And then, you know, in turn, a lot of times it takes us taking that first step, right, to make the other person feel comfortable sharing those things with us.
Correct. Yeah. And it's a balance because on one hand, you know, everything is not sunshine and butterflies. On the other hand, I don't want to always be in a situation where I'm always hearing the complaints.
Yes.
It's like, is there a progression here? Is there some growth? Is there some insight that's going to make me shift in my mindset, in my way of seeing things and doing things? That's the other caveat when you're building your community. But yes, definitely getting out there, doing things. And so I said, you know, postpartum depression is very, very real for a lot of moms, and that settles in, I think, because a lot of people ignore mom after she has the baby, right? It's like she may be well nurtured while she's pregnant, but afterwards everything becomes about the baby, and it's like, no, mommy needs to be very much so nurtured. After having a child, she just delivered an entire soul, so she may be exhausted, not just on a physical level, but on a mental and a spiritual and emotional level as well. And so we have to consider and take those kinds of things into consideration, and that is a piece of your self-care and conjuring your self-care, is in being proactive with your self-care, understanding that you are and will need a community around you, because oftentimes when we get into these emotional funks, it's because we are missing some sort of connection somewhere, right? Some sort of connection is disrupted somewhere. And so with that said, Nikki, how can people get in touch with you? Do you only service your area, or do you service, you know, via phone, you know, people in other areas? How can people get in touch with you?
I do service via phone or Skype or Zoom, video conferencing. But the best way to get in contact with me is I have a website, tothemoonparentcoaching.com. So on there, you can subscribe to my email list and become one of my proactive parent community, part of my proactive parenting community. And you'll get, you know, a weekly newsletter with all my parenting support, free tips and stuff, just to help keep you motivated on this parenting journey. I feel like once a week is a great kind of boost and morale as far as that goes. And then on Instagram and Facebook, you can find me at To The Moon Parent Coaching. As well. And you can DM me, you can, there's a link to my phone number, all that good stuff on there. I do free mini sessions. So if you are interested in just finding out more on how I can support you personally and in your parenting journey to help, you know, again, make this process of parenting less of a struggle and more of an enjoyment and a fulfillment.
Yes. Yes, 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 yes. I love that. I love that last sentence particularly because again, something I always say is like, look, if you have children, especially if you have multiple children, you're getting to relive childhood again.
Yes.
That should be, I mean, I know for some people that could be traumatizing, but if you look at the playfulness of it, that's great. It's great, good stuff.
Yeah.
So, yes, connect with Nikki. I'll follow her on. That's how I became connected with Nikki, was through Instagram and just seeing how she was supporting parents and understanding these critical areas to help to free them up, to free them up and enjoy the parenting and enjoy their lives as a family without getting stuck on these behaviors, or on these things that they're seeing as obstacles as opposed to learning points of learning, I guess you could say. So thank you so much, Nikki,
You're
for
welcome.
joining us. And thank you all of the listeners. I know that you have gotten a lot of wonderful, powerful information to utilize on your parenting journey. And thank you so much. If you want to contact Nikki, I will certainly put her information in the bio of this podcast. And it was a pleasure. Take care, everyone. See you
Thank
next
you.
time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Did you like that? I know it was as informative for you as it was for me. Look, this is a process for all of us. And to keep this process going, I would love to invite you to donate to our podcast. We want to continue to give you high-level content, beautiful content that enlightens and inspires and broadens your vision to elevate you and evolve. So please feel free to go to the podcast page at anchor.fm/Mommy Matters. We would love to hear your questions and comments as well, so that we can discuss them in future podcasts. And you can email that to momevolve@gmail.com. You can also visit the website and send your comments there. www.mommyevolve.com. And I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Peace and love.